is Sunday's. This is what do you call it? The Daf of Shabbos of Samach Beis. The Mishnah continues, and actually the Shem have a difficult time understanding why this Mishnah, the first half of the Mishnah at least, is right here. How does it follow on? Because we had a whole Gemara before Daf Test. If somebody said to her, "I'm a Levi, I'm a Kohen," and it turned out to be that he wasn't, I'm rich, and I turned out to be poor, and vice versa. You know how we view that. Then here the Mishnah says, what happens? He didn't spell it out. He just thought about it, or she thought about it. Hamakadosh Isha. If somebody gave it to a woman, but somebody said, because somebody said, I thought she canis. I thought that she's a kohen. I didn't Levi, trying to be Levi. No, but he's trying to say the whole thing was based on an error, on a false premise, even though he never spelled it out. She never said anything. He never spelled it out. This is an assumption that he always made. Or Levi, I thought she was Levi, trying to be a canis. Ania, I thought she was poor. Ashila, she's rich. Or Ashila, she's rich. She's poor. Harezu Kadeshes, there's Kiddushin for sure. She did not in any way deceive him whatsoever. He deceived himself. He should have asked. And therefore, it's called Dvarim Shebelev. And we had that in the whole Gemara before. Dvarim Shebelev, how do we know? So the question is, why is it here? So some of the Shem answer, this is a continuation of Chanin and Gimel. Chanin and Gimel told us that we make inferences. You don't have to spell everything out. If you do this and this is what happens. You don't have to spell out, and if you don't do this and this. So we would have thought, how far do we go? Maybe over here also, if you can see the way he behaved, it looked like he assumed that you was poor or rich and anything else, maybe it's as if it's spoken out. Which therefore opens a whole subject here. When we have this discussion or a mayor, and you need it tonight, couple. First of all, the halacha. Some Shem say the halacha is always like a mayor. The Rif says the halacha is like a mayor only when it comes to Gittin and Kiddushin, not when it comes to money matters and so on and so forth. But a lot of times the Gemara doesn't, when they talk about conditions, it doesn't spell out. And if you don't, you don't. So some Rishonim say the Gemara doesn't always have to spell out exactly. Like the Rambam writes, I'm giving you the rules of Tanai Meir, and the rest you just, you should follow and you'll know exactly what it is. But others say where it's obvious, we don't need to spell it out. Like when we talk about an esrog, we don't find the Gemara says, I'm giving you, if you give it back to me, it's your yaitz. If you gave it back to me afterwards, you'll fulfill the mitzvah. It doesn't say anyway. If you don't give it back to me, you're not, because it's obvious. That's what I want. So where it's obvious, we don't have to spell out tonight kafel. And this Mishnah here is telling you, but this is not so obvious. And therefore, even according to Rav Chanina, you would say that we won't rely on what your thoughts are. Now goes the next part of the Mishnah, which is totally unrelated, and that is the concept of a davar shalai b'olam. If you want to make a kinyan on something that doesn't exist yet, and I say when it comes around, that's called a davar shalai b'olam, and we have a big machlekes Rameya and others whether it's a valid Kiddushin, whether it's a valid kinyan or not. Then in Amafkid we learn the machlekes Amarayim, like I'm giving the fruits of a tree, I'm selling you, but the fruits haven't even started yet. But there's an ever that they'll grow, or the tree is here where the fruits are coming from. It's a davar shalai. Then you have a thing called lid davar shalai b'olam. The object is here, but I'm going to give it to your child that one day you'll have a child. Right now you don't have any child. That's to lid davar shalai. So even those who hold that you can sell an object that doesn't exist yet, when it comes into the world, it'll be yours. But you have to be able to sell to somebody who exists. If to a person who isn't born yet, you cannot sell to. So our Mishnah comes along and says the following: a man says to the woman, you'll engage to me after I convert. So right now I'm a guy. There's no Kiddushin, but I'm going to convert. Or after you convert. After I'm an Ebed right now when I'm set free. Or after you're set free. I love you, but you're married. When your husband dies, he's sick. We'll marry each other. And the thing is, he gave her Kiddushin. And the question is, and he said, it's like after, we looked in the mission before, here's Kiddushin, it should take effect after 30 days. Here's Kiddushin, it should take effect after your husband dies. Is that Kiddushin chal? Let's say later on she changes her mind and the husband dies. Does she need a get? Or after your sister dies, I marry your wife's sister, but once your wife is dead, you can marry her. Not very nice. Or after your brother-in-law, who's supposed to marry you because your husband died, gives you chalitza, I want to marry her. Now, these are things that don't exist now. Even though, according to many, if you give Kiddushin to a woman who is waiting for her brother-in-law, the Kiddushin is chal. But there are those who hold that Kiddushin is not chal. Forget about Rabbi Kiva, hold that Kiddushin never works if there's an Avera to live with. Kohen marrying a divorcee, there's no Kiddushin at all. We pass an halacha, it's an Avera, but there's a valid engagement, a valid Kiddushin. But when it comes to Yavam, there's an argument because maybe she's considered already married to the guy. It's not just an obligation to marry. There's zikah, there's that bond. and therefore your Kiddushin is not chal. That's what this mission learns. All these cases not Mekudesh. Why? It's a davar shalom b'leilam. If a guy says to his friend, if your wife gives birth to a girl, I don't want to be engaged to her. And because there's no child around. Says the Gemara, this is the concept of a davar shaloi bola olam. Says the Gemara, we learned, and this is the famous Rivash, the question, how did Esav sell his Bechira to Yaakov when it's a davar shaloi bola olam? The whole concept of Bechira didn't exist yet. And he sold him the concept of Bechira, the whole concept didn't exist. How can he sell him davar shaloi bola olam? Anyway, now as we learned, Ein termin min hatolush. Oh, okay. The Gemara will talk about it, but we'll say the Mishnah. So the Mishnah, Im ha'isa eishes chaveiroi mu'bedes. If she was already pregnant, so the question is, pregnancy. How do we view a fetus inside the mother's womb? Is that like already existing, or not? So the Mishnah says, Im ha'isa eishes chaveiroi mu'bedes. If she was pregnant, go hukarubra, and it's recognizable. So there's something there. Then the word of kayamin. And the Yald in the cave of Mekadesh should not be a girl. It's a valid because there's something here. Says the Gemara. We learned there when you give truma, you have to give truma from the crop that was already harvested. But if it's still growing, you don't give truma. And Rashi said we learn that from the word digoncha. It has to be your pile, which means it's already cut off. Case other Shem learned from somewhere else. They don't like Rashi shop. But anyway, so it's what you did was the following: you took truma from proper crop that was already harvested, and you say, you know what, I want this to be set aside as truma and include also that which is still growing, which is mechuber. Now, at the moment, mechuber, there's no mitzvah of truma yet. It's only when you harvest it. It's a davar shaloi bola olam. So says the Mishnah, ein termin min hatolush ala mechuber. You cannot take normal crop and say, I want this to become truma, and I wanted to satisfy that whole field over there. The imtarim ain't truma. It's not a valid truma because a davar shaloi bola olam. You haven't yet harvested that. You haven't yet cut the crop over there. So what happens is you're not allowed to eat after you harvest that field. You're not allowed to eat it because there was no truma given, and the truma you set aside is not really truma. It's still tevel because it's not truma. What about the following? So that doesn't work because it's not existing. What about Omar? You said Pedas Arugad Lushim. This field, this row over here that's already been harvested, right? Chayiv and truma. Ye truma peres harugazum b'chabarim should be truma for that other rows over there that are still growing. Peres harugazum b'chabarim, or ye peres harugazum b'chabarim, ye truma peres harugazum tlusha. I want that. I'm gonna eventually, once I harvest that field over there, I'm going to use that as truma for the ones over here that are cut off. If he said it should happen right now, there's nothing to talk about. It's a davar shaloi olam. I'm saying now, when it bola olam, when it comes into the world, makes an appearance into the world, I want that now. What I'm doing now should take effect then. What happens in this case here? Good question. The nitlishin, and then you cut it off. Mao. What happens then? Do we say, since you initially said I don't want to take effect until I actually cut it when there's chayiv, so therefore it should be effective, or do we say the fact is right now you're not capable of doing it, so how can it take effect later? Almost Rabbi Yechon said the following rule: Kol should be yada. If you're capable of doing it right now, just for whatever reason you're not doing it right now, so therefore there's no chiyuv. You can't do it yet. But it's totally up to you when. It's as if it's already bola olam. If you are able to harvest it right now, even though you didn't, it's as if it's bola olam. Eitel has a question. It says, you're becoming my wife after I become a convert, which is, as we'll see later, it's totally up to me. And yet it's called a davar shaloi bola olam. Lachash it is gairi. Lachash it I become free. Lachash it you go free. Lachash all the occasions like okay, all the other things that the husband should die. These are all things that not in your control. And a gay how did the other? He says after I become a gay, since control. So according to you, Rabbi Yechanan, that should be a valid Kiddushin. He's saying after I become a ger, so it should take effect then, and it's up to me when I become a ger. Nami lab the yodas. You want to say ger nami lab the yodas? Why? Because ger tzorich you need a bezin. There's different steps in conversion. One is Kabbalah's mitzvahs. You have to say that I'm prepared to accept all. You have to teach him some of the lenient mitzvahs, some of the stricter mitzvahs. He says, I accept it. If he said, I accept the entire Torah, except one mitzvah, the Rabbanan, you're not a valid gate. So you need a bezin. Big machleik is a shaynim if you also need a bezin for going to the mikveh and or not. But you definitely need a bezin when it comes to going for Kabbalah's mitzvahs. And cool. So my timer. What's the reason? Tais already asked, why do you need three people for Kabbalah's and mitzvahs? We know when it comes to courts of judgment or there's a dispute, you can have a don yechidi. If he's a yachid mumcha, you can be alone. Why do you have to have three judges there? So Tais said, we're not comparing it to cases of loans. We're comparing it to cases of, let's say, gezelas or chavalas, stealing. Where there you need a bezin of three. You always need three. And why? Because whenever we have to learn, it says the word mishpat, and you have to learn from a bezin. But what kind of bezin? A bezin that deals with commercial disputes, where there technically you can have two according to Shmuel, you can have yachid mumcha, or do we compare to a bezin that handles gzelas or chavalas, which there you always need three. And whenever we don't know which way to go, we always take the stricter side. So the obvious question is, for gzelah chavalas, you need mumcha. We don't have mumcha today. We don't have smicha today. We don't have mumcha today. How does it work? So one answer is that we said in Margit in the Pechester, a non-shlichusayu avdin, and we are proxies for the bezin of back then, or because it says doidei seichem, which means forevermore. That means the Torah is giving allowance that we can be a bezin even today. It says in my time, Mishpah, it says Mishpah, so what? And miyemer kedin like a din, and miyemer the mizakle. Since you need three people, you have no control. If people don't think that you're honest or that if you have integrity, they're not going to come to give you gairis. So therefore, it's not in your control. That's why it's not chal. So if a man gives to his maid, it's up to, she is now like sort of she has to follow all the mitzvahs, but she's not yet a full-fledged Jewess. He sets her free, she becomes a Jewess straight away. According to many poskim, she doesn't have to go through the ritual of Kabbalah's mitzvahs. And one of the proofs is from right here, as we'll see in a minute. If he gives a prutah to his maid, and he says, "You're free. You're my wife the moment I set you free." So right now he can't marry her, but he's saying it should happen as soon, and he's in total control. You can tell me that it's a valid Kiddushin. We know that it isn't. And now, if she needs a bezdin as well, then what's the question? We just answered that the bezdin not control. It must be that the moment he sets the eved l'shivcha free, they become a full-blown Jewess. Nothing else to do. So over here, she doesn't exist. When she becomes a yid, she changes from one person to another person. Now she has a mind of her own. So therefore, that person that you spoke to doesn't exist. It's not like in all the other cases. The person exists. Your sister is alive, you can't marry her, but when your sister dies, so there maybe, or the crop exists. I just have to cut it off. Here, the person you're talking to is not the person that you're planning to marry, because now she's a different person altogether. Now we don't use the concept that we brought down in Gemara Yivamis that a gesh and his guy could cut Chanel dummy, which is the standard thing. Because Rabbi Yechon himself doesn't necessarily have Zayin, he doesn't really hold of it, because he says if a goy had children while he was a goy and then becomes a Jew, he might have been fulfilled the mitzvah. He doesn't have to have more children. He might fulfill the mitzvah. In other words, the change of person is not as great as a shlaki just said. It's a whole new person. You're not Yaitse. Oh, that's the machlek l'shay. Very good. Some want to say that the emphasis here is because she was a maid, and a maid or a slave has no chayis, belongs to the master. Therefore, it changes from being owned by somebody to being a free person. Others say that that's not the vart. Others say the vart is goy to yid, and that's exactly the machlek how you understand it. That's how they defend themselves and saying, "Don't bring your hands, don't do it with our case." Think about it further. Very good. The Elahodam says, "Rabbi made a rule. If somebody gives a prutah wife, this is very weird. I have a terrible temper, but it's if I divorce you, I want you to be married to me because I really love you. So he gave her Kiddushin, and he said, in case I divorce you, automatically you're married to me again. Ain't a Kiddushin. Why? Because at the moment, Kiddushin is not nowhere to go. Are you going to tell me Yechon holds that Kiddushin because it's up to him whether he can divorce or not? So my answer is no. He has the right to divorce her. Does he have the is it biyada? Right now he does not have the capacity to get engaged. She's already a married woman to him. So therefore, it's not biyadai right now to get her engaged. Says the Gemara. Let's resolve the question of Aisha. What is the question? A guy gives two fruits to the woman, but achas at the same time. He said, "He's catching today. You're mekudesh the first pruta. Over achas, he's catching achas yagash." Another one he says, "You're mekudesh me after I divorce you." So it's not like the previous case they were married already, and then one day he said to her, I know I have a terrible temper, and I know I'm going to do crazy things. Here I'm talking about from the outset, he gave her two protests. knowing already what kind of temper he has. So according to Rabbi Yechanan, Tif Sheminah they'll have Kiddushin. So here we see, according to Rabbi Yechanan, we should say it's not biyodeh right now to marry a second time, because you can only marry one at a time. So and yet it says she has a question, and Rabbi Yechanan would say no, definitely not. So you want to know. The only reason why you should ask the question is because since you put the two coins together, and because the first coin is definitely going to be effective, maybe there's a tag along or drag along, and it drags along the second coin. But you're right. In a case where they're already married, and he comes over to her and he says, "Here's a bruta. In case I divorce you, you're married." Then everyone will agree it's a double shalei b'la'olam. She's married right now, double b'la'olam, and standing your control. And the Rabbi's question is because right now you're giving her a bruta. Says you cannot give truma from the cut off from harvested crop to that which is growing. If he did, it's not worth going to that. If he said that this solution should be truma for that which is attached. This is the part of the Raisa that we want to use. If you clearly stipulate that I want it to take effect after you harvest that second field, then it's effective. Why? Because that's not anymore double shalei b'layla, because you have the capacity to do it right now if you wanted to. Yes, it okay. Yaakov argues. He holds, I believe, Bechlal, that you could. I hold like those opinions that say you could deal with a davar shalei b'layla. I disagree. I hold even if you said Peiris Aruga Zu Tulushin Yia Truma Peiris Aruga Zu Mechaberis, I don't add the word when I cut it off. Right now. Or Peiris Aruga Zu Mechaberis Yia Truma Peiris Aruga Tulushin Likishayavay Shlish. He says, according to this verse, I need a third ready. In other words, it doesn't have to be ready, which means right now I can't cut it down. It's only ready a third. It's not edible yet, really, for people. The Yitlishu Vevi Shlish Nitzul and now karov is kayamin. So this right now we're saying is not considered davar shel. It's not really davar shel b'la'olam yet. It didn't grow properly. It's only a third ready, which really it's only suitable for animal fodder. And nevertheless, it's good. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba now limits Rabba Lazar ben Yaakov, and he says, Amar Lazar ben Yaakov ela b'shachas. He's talking about it has to grow a certain amount. So it's sort of davar shel b'la'olam because animals can eat it. At least it's worth something. But if it's an agam, that means what? It's really just sprouting, just starting to blossom. It's not even fit for animal fodder. Then that's mamish davar shaloi bala olam, and it's not effective. And Rabbi Yosef says no. I feel ba'agam. Rabbi Yosef says no. Even ba'agam also it's effective. So before we get to the main subject, my mashba the high agam lisha the butzlan. I know the word agam means even just starting to sprout. What kind of word is agam? Agam usually means like a swamp. What do you mean that agam is just starting to sprout? We have a pasuk in the Torah that he says over there, halakoiv ke egma roisha. You're going to bend your head down like an egman, like this kind of a bush over there. And so we see that egman means something that a very low bush and you bend and bent over. So we see it could be something that is just starting to sprout. And enough that you can bend it. Just starting to sprout means that it came off the ground and it grew enough that you can take that blade of grass, whatever it is, and bend it over. And that's enough. Anyway, getting back to the main subject. Keman Ozlos, according to who does it go? The following time we learned. So we learned the Lezen Yaakov holds that the Davar Shabbat Olam still has to be something there. Not like totally non-existent. The question is only how much. And we learned. A guy says a friend, if your wife gives birth to a girl, she's engaged to me. But Chanina says only if the wife is not pregnant. But the wife is pregnant. The wife is pregnant, then there's something there. Come on. Well, according to Rabba says you need shachas. It has to be recognizable. It has to be something much more substantial. And he can be just sprouting, even though it's not really noticeable. But both of them is still a little bit of a davar something. The next opinion is a no. That Rabba holds it has to be not just like a third ready fodder, but it has to be something that comes from, let's say, rainwater. The Beishaki, but if it's a field that needs irrigation, constant irrigation, then light, because sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it's not definite. It's not definite, therefore it's no good. A field that requires extra water, not sure if to me it's a light bal oilam. So come on, Oslo, according to this version of the argument, who goes to tell we learned how if your wife is a girl, make Kadesh's leashes engaged to me, I'm a klum. Only she's not pregnant. In this case, it's not enough. Everyone agrees you need shachas. Question is, if irrigation water, which is not so definite, is good enough. So everyone holds that you need that your woman should be noticeably pregnant. That now that we raise the subject of Davar Shalai Ba'olam, I want you to know that Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov, as a big machlekes, we have a general rule. Obviously, Yaakov, his mission is kavanaki, because he only said a few halachas. Whatever he said, the halachas like him. But here, there's a big argument if the halachas like him. Abai also said there's a few lone tanoim who agree with this shita, as if Abai is saying, but halacha is not like them. Others disagree. So Rabbi Lezer, Yaakov, Rebbe, and Rabbi Meir, Kulas, they all hold other makta Davar Shalai Ba'olam. Yaakov, whatever we just said. But remember, in this Rabbi Yaakov, it's not at all existing. There's something there. Rebbe, the time we learned that you should not send back an eved to his master. Rebbe says, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a person who purchased an eved in order to set him free. If he was set free, and then I buy him to work with me, then it's a different story. He's not called an eved. The trader calls him an eved. That means he's still an eved. So if you bought him as an eved to set him free, you can't change him up. You got to set him free. What are we talking about? I'm not really going to Kosel. He wrote him. The moment I buy you, he tells the eved, I'm going to buy you from the other outright from the other master, and retrospectively, you're going to be a free person. Can't change your mind then. But that didn't happen yet. I didn't buy you yet. That's the Davar Shalai Ba'olam. That made the time you learn. A person says to his wife, to a woman, guy, you'll become my wife if after I become a convert. You're not mekudesh. That's like our Mishnah. Rameya says mekudeshes because he holds a Davar Shalai Ba'olam. But it's not. It's so yes. So it's a Davar Shalai Ba'olam. Rabbi Yechon Sandler, so he goes further than Rabbi Yaakov because the conversion hasn't even started yet. Rabbi Yechon Sandler says, she's not engaged because you can't. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Ema Mikadeshes. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi agrees. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, which is Rabbi, agrees with Rameir that a Davar Shalai Ba'olam is valid. Says the Gemara, Umat Tam Amra in Mikadeshes. So why did the Poil say that she's not Mekudesh? Mishum Eva. The only reason why I said Namakudish is because while the sister's alive, while you're married to a woman, you're telling her sister, the moment my wife dies, I'm going to marry you. I mean, you can imagine what that does to their relationship. So the only reason why Rebbe said it's not a good Kiddushin is Mishum Eva. You don't want to create this animosity between the husband and the wife. Or you say to this woman, after your husband dies and you're stuck with your brother-in-law, your brother-in-law give a chalitza, I'm going to marry you. What's that going to do with the relationship between her husband and her? Oh, so two cases that Rebbe argues, but the other case he agrees that the principle of Davar Shalai Ba'olam he agrees with. Says so why does Abaye say doesn't include a B'yud Nasi? He agrees on Meir. Says it's the same person. So why mention it both? The Nechsha Nami Rabbi Kiva. There's another Tana who holds Davar Shalai Ba'olam. We learn Koinim Shani Oisel Picha. A woman says that everything that I earn. I don't want you should have any benefit from it. I want to be like Hegdish. The husband does not have to know this kind of a neder. Why? Because everything she works belongs to the husband. So she can't make a neder to prohibit it to the husband. Doesn't have to cancel it. Rabbi Kiva says he does. Shema Tadif Olav, yes, love. Let's say all he needs from her is $10 a week, and she earns an excess. Or let's say because that's how much he has to feed her, but she earns a lot more money than that. And that she can, and that therefore, the husband, she can make a neder on that and ask her. Therefore, the husband, if he wants to stop it, he has to break her neder straight away because it does affect him. And we said right there how much a person needs it in different parts of Israel. That's a Davar Shalai Ba'olam. She didn't earn yet more than that. Says we learned but I menace she's not being mekadosh what I'm going to earn tomorrow. That's Davar Shalai Ba'olam. She's the hands that are going to produce that. I am answering anything that comes from these hands, and that's right here.